Welcome to the Power We Hold podcast. My name is Vanessa Albury. I'm a visual artist who grew up in the South, and I moved to New York City the day before my interview for graduate school at NYU in March of 2006. I've been here ever since, and I love it. I've started this podcast to mark my journey as I learn how to become a better and better ally to my Black and brown friends, neighbors, and strangers. I have with me today my co-host, Caleb Williams. And before I tell you more about myself, I'd like Caleb to tell us a little bit about herself.
Hi, my name is Caleb Williams. I am born and raised in Queens, New York. I am an artist, and I currently have a movement, I should say, that's named Urban Jungle. And the goal of Urban Jungle is to capture, reinterpret the beautiful, the ugly, and unpolished aspects of society through different mediums. My main medium, which I pursue this through, is painting, and that is how Vanessa and I have built our connection.
Exactly. Well, I was just thinking about the first time we met in the summer of 2019, and one of the paintings you showed me. I was just so touched and impressed by the nuance that you brought to your understanding and experience of Black life in America through your personal lens and through the historic lens. Do you want to tell us a little bit about your painting?
Yes. Just to clarify, it's the one with the woman.
It was the room with the faces.
Yes. Yeah. So I truly throughout my years in school, we have read a lot of different readings that talk about racism and the idea of where does it come from. And I feel like it comes from, it's not just where it comes from. I think it's more an inner conflict, and the idea that the stereotypes that we have been embedded with have come from generations and generations and been passed down, and that's why you may think a certain way, or I might think a certain way. But I think what it really comes down to is us really sitting down within ourselves and asking, where does this come from, and why do I think like this, and how can I break those barriers to have my own perspective, on how I look at Black and brown people, since that's what our conversation revolves around.
Yeah. And when did you start painting?
I started painting in the 4th grade.
Wow.
But I didn't start really working on pieces that revolve around social justice until I started high school. And it was really hard for me because the art school that I went to, there weren't a lot of African Americans there, so I didn't really know what to paint about or what my passion was. So it wasn't until I started reading the news more and seeing what was happening to my Black and brown sisters, brothers and sisters, and it really sparked a fire in me to want to give voices to Black and brown stories that aren't highlighted in regular media, Yeah.
Wow. So we started collaborating about almost a year ago in May 2020 with an art project that I started called Between the Windows that I began on the front of my apartment building from between my windows. And it started out featuring artists in my community, in Greenpoint in particular, who had lost opportunities, and also so to give them an opportunity to show their work, and then also to share contemporary art with my neighbors, because all the museums were closed, all the galleries were closed. I was imagining what was on the walls of people's homes, and I imagined that most of them probably did not have original artworks, and if they had any artworks, I imagined that they might have been something picked up on a tourist destination. Beautiful, but not necessarily thought-provoking. And contemporary art is about ideas and dialogue and conversation and really the contemporary moment we're in. And so I think it's really essential to be surrounded by contemporary art all the time. So when George Floyd died, I realized that I had created a platform that was a great opportunity to put into people's minds in the fore of their vision on the front of our buildings, just like the 1960s protest banners on bed sheets, Black and brown experiences. And I remembered your painting that I was so moved by, and so then I reached out to you. Yeah. Can you say something about like what about the project drew you in?
I think that, like you said, during the pandemic, there was like barely any opportunities for artists. And I felt like as an artist, I had a lot of things taken away from me as going from a student, living in the city, you know, having opportunities. Like I had nothing, you know, and during the time of George Floyd, I had that spark again to create work because I was so frustrated that I'm still creating all this. I was creating work since I was 2016 about, you know, police brutality, and it's still happening in 2020 during that time period. And it was really frustrating, and the platform you had allowed me to show my work and, you know, be like 100% real with it and not have to tone it down, you know, which most spaces that if I was to, I feel like would be like, I don't know, you know. So you allowed me to be, you know, true to myself and what I believed in. So that's what really took me in.
I'm smiling really big right now because I'm really honored to hold that space. Like I feel very privileged and lucky to have come across your path at the time that we did, and
everything happens for a reason.
Everything happens for a reason indeed. Well, that gets us towards the intention for this podcast, and I want to start out with a quote that I think is a nice setting for this conversation. It's from the Combahee River Collective statement from 1977. This is a collective of Black women that saw a hole in the white feminist movement and in the civil rights movement that didn't include specific needs of Black women and Black lesbians in particular. This group was active from 77 or maybe a little before that until like 1980. So here's the quote. As Black feminists, we are made constantly and painfully aware of how little effort white women have made to understand and combat their racism, which requires, among other things, that they have a more than superficial comprehension of race, color, and Black history and culture. Eliminating racism in the white women's movement is by definition work for white women to do, but we will continue to speak to and demand accountability on this issue. So I really like that quote because there's a certain level of empowerment for, or maybe it's a call to action to white women to step into a leadership role and combat the white supremacist patriarchy that we are all suppressed by, not just as women, but or people of color, but also men are suppressed by this as well. So this podcast, The Power We Hold, is really about exploring the power that we hold as individuals to activate change and to create sea change. Because when we all start changing our behavior, we have massive effects. Yeah. And we really started seeing that this year. And what I also love about this statement, which, or rather what I love about this collective statement, the entire statement, is that they come from a place of love. That's something you and I talk about a lot. Not that there's not place for anger. Yeah. And anger is very powerful. And anyone who is angry is justified. Yeah. And there is no judgment on how they activate their anger. But there's a hope that I think you and I both shared to use that anger to fuel movement in a positive direction. Yeah. So what are your thoughts around your intention for this podcast?
I really, like you kind of talked about already, like I feel like this podcast can allow people to internalize, their thoughts and how they can be better allies and process things, and really take the steps, because they don't teach us these things. We aren't taught these things, and we're kind of left with what we have learned, and that's from our past. And like I said before, like you have to kind of break down your past and like start thinking for your own. And the only way to think for your own is, to really start digging deep. And I feel like that's what the purpose of this podcast is, to allow you to dig deep, and by the time you're done with it, have your own perspective, on how you can be a better ally.
I love that. It reminds me of a quote that I can't recall if it's Glennon Doyle or Brene Brown, but it's the idea that we're all born into racism like we're born into air. Mm-hmm. And there's a time when every one of us has the opportunity to face it. As white people, it's an opportunity, but as Black and brown people, it's like a rude slap in the face. Yeah. Right? And to become a better ally, you have to start looking at those things that you don't have to look at. Yeah. As a privileged class. Mm-hmm. And start to put yourself in the position of other people, which is not easy to do.
It's not easy to do, and then it's also like you can put yourself in their position, but you won't ever understand really how like how Black and brown people feel, but you can still be like, okay, in order for you to be a better ally.
Yeah, it's like compassion, right? It's like, I'll never understand what it means to walk down the street as a Black person, to walk, as I know you've told me about, walking into a bodega as 6 friends and your eyes are on you the whole time. I'll never understand that, but I do understand fear. Yeah. I do understand anger. I do understand being misunderstood. Mm-hmm. So it's like the feelings, we're all made of the same stuff. We all experience feelings. Yeah. We all come at them from different perspectives, but I can understand being misunderstood, right? And that the feelings that come with that.
Yeah, and it sucks, and all that stuff. So yeah.
Yeah. As we've been collaborating for almost a year, I've been awakening more and more to how I can improve as an ally. Mm-hmm. And you've been generous to walk through some of this with me. And, you asked me once if I would be your mentor in art. And I realized in that moment, well, of course I would. And actually you're my mentor in becoming a better ally. And I really see it as a symbiotic interaction, which I think is really nice. How would you describe our relationship?
Literally that. Literally that, because it's like, although I'm helping you, understand things, I'm still internalizing them as my own. How do I really feel about it? But it also shows me, if you can have these conversations with white people, and to see, it just really shows me, there is hope. There is, people are willing to, want to learn to be better allies, the world isn't so bad. There are people out there, and it's just, I love that, you know what I'm saying? And it's just, I want to be able to, I feel like one of my purposes on this earth is to, help people. I feel like I'm a helper, and I don't, it takes different forms as I grow, whether it's through art, or, you know, through conversations, you know, helping, healing, all that stuff. And, you know, I'm just doing what I'm here to do, and that's just how I see it, and you're also helping me. So it's, you know, I think everything happens for a reason. So I feel like our talks in private were meant for what we're doing now, what we're going to be sharing with others.
I totally agree. I like just light up when you talk about. I'm thinking about the education process and how the onus is really on the privileged class to educate themselves, and we can't do it by ourselves.
Yeah.
Right? We need Black and brown people to let us know what their experiences are, and some of them, it's not every Black or brown person's responsibility to like educate me or any other white person, and at all. But at the same time, it's that collaboration and that willingness to see like my effort and to acknowledge that helps me like go deeper into it and go farther into it.
And it also helps us it like simultaneously, you know. And like you said, like it isn't every Black and brown person's, you know, job too. And I know some Black and brown people feel like it isn't, and you know, I personally feel, and that's okay, but I personally feel like our ancestors came this far, and it came this far for us and just not stay complacent, you know, like we've gotten like really, from where we started, we've gotten a long way, but we still have issues, you know. Black and brown people are killed every day, you know, and we still have things that we are fighting for. So it's like, we gotta keep fighting, and I know that it may seem like we've been fighting for so long, but I feel like we gotta do the work in order to show, and, you know, having allies is what will allow us to, you know, get to where we want to go, and just having hope and, you know, continue to persevere, you know. So
perseverance, it's the title of one of your installation with Between the Windows. I was just thinking about the burden that falls on Black and brown people as they go through the world experiencing the effects of racism, and then the possible resistance and annoyance at needing to educate or handhold some white people to like do better. How do you manage those possible frustrations? Like, do you ever get frustrated? I mean, I know you've been frustrated with me before, and I totally understand why, but what do you think?
I don't get frustrated ever having conversations, because I've learned over the years, like, it's not about who's right and who's wrong. It's about coming to an understanding. But more so, what I do get frustrated with is, like, constantly seeing my Black and brown brothers and sisters being portrayed in a light that's not how we truly are. You know, the constant stereotypes, or, you know, the constant killings, and, you know, it's just, like, and the constant just racism, you know. It's just sad, and it's frustrating, and it's just, like, even when I have to do works about it, it's draining, because I don't want to see my brothers and sisters being killed. You know, I don't want to, like, constantly have to read about that. And it's just like, I understand. I know that we are beautiful people, and we have so much culture and so much love and so much hope in our bodies. And it's just like, I know that's what we are at the end of the day. And it's like, I had to get it tattooed on my body, because, like, it's so draining that I need to have a constant reminder, like, I'm not what society says I am. You know, I'm not the picture they paint me, my brother, my mom, my dad, anybody to be, you know, because I know what we are. So the frustration doesn't come for me personally with having to educate or talk to, you know, and, you know, and I wouldn't say, like, some things are, like, frustrating, like, when it's just, like, if we have a misunderstanding, it's about really taking the time to just take a step back, you know, and be like, this is where she's coming from, and this is where I'm coming from, and then having a conversation about it. But yeah, I don't usually get frustrated over that.
It's impressive. That's a skill. It's a skill that that I hope everyone can develop more and more. That reminds me of a little shadow that I have around doing this podcast. I mean, the idea first came to me in May or June last year. And when the idea came to me, I was like, oh, some other white person should make a podcast about becoming a better white ally for Black people. But not me. I'm not the right person to do this. I was like thinking of all these people. Like, I have a white friend in Nashville, Tennessee, who's a police officer and wants to like do better. He wants to create a better system. I was like, he should do it. No. So then the idea hit me again really hard. I call it a ping. It just like was like a download. It was like, Vanessa, you have to do this. It was like a few months later. And that's when I started talking to you about it. And it, you know, it's been like 8 or 9 months since that time. And it's really taken me that long to like sit with what this is and face my own shadow around the discomfort of revealing myself as someone who is a person in progress. I'm not an ally complete. I am an ally in training. And even though I grew up with Black people in my school, I went to this amazing high school run by a powerful principal who started it, Dr. Spence, who named the school after Dr. Martin Luther King. And she was just so motivational and powerful and saw excellence for all of us. And we were a diverse group of people. And then in my dad's Kingdom Hall, there were a lot of Black people that I was close to. So the shadow comes in around being close to Black people and still seeing how far I was a year ago from seeing things that I didn't want to see. And when George Floyd was murdered, I should say, it was like the slap in the face that I needed. And not that I didn't have slaps in the face before, but I had distractions before. I had life distracting me, but now I had quarantine confining me. And so my attention could really go where it needed to go in a whole new way. But there's still shadow around like being vulnerable and understanding that I'm in progress, so I will probably step in it. Like I will probably at some point say something that that needs addressing, that needs some more education, that reveals my incompleteness, and learning to embrace that is the job, I think, of the white ally. Seeing where you need to grow and allowing the awkward parts and the uncomfortable parts, because you're confronting a status quo, like we were talking about earlier. And that's going to be uncomfortable.
I think that also it is to remember, like, it's like to not put such pressure, because it's not about perfection. No one's perfect. I think it's about progression. You know, understanding where you were a year ago to where you are now. And I think that should always be the goal, progression. You know, no one's perfect.
It's the nuance that comes with, like what you're pointing to is the nuance that comes with dealing with the topic for a long time. And what is revealed to me in this conversation about my position is that I'm in that baby stage of where everything is like so dramatic in a way. And so it takes time to experience your growth and trust your growth, and not be in the throes of all the emotions around it.
I think that's where processing definitely comes in, like sitting and understanding, and you know. But yeah, it all takes time. It does. It does take time, but I think there's also that awkward period in growth where you're like, this was me before. This is where I'm trying to be, or this is where I am now. And it's like, you're battling between how you were in the past and where you are in the present. And then somehow it's just like you kind of like, you know, shed that old skin, and now you're in a new phase where it's like, okay, I'm in this.
Yeah.
But how do I maneuver? You know, like, how do I maneuver with all the stuff I've learned, and all the stuff that I did know is gone? How do I maneuver now? How do I, you know, put my best foot forward? So it's everything is like constantly evolving. I was in a Zoom call, and someone said that healing isn't always like you do the steps and you're healed.
Right.
And I always felt like that's what it is. Like, you do the steps, you're healed. Whatever you're dealing with is gone. But no, your healing constantly takes different forms. Like, you're constantly healing. It's just a matter of how you deal with it now. And I think that's the same way with, you know, learning and growing. You know, you don't just grow overnight. You know, you grow every day. You're not the same person you were yesterday, you know, and neither am I. But constantly evolving, constantly changing, just being aware of those changes.
Yeah. Yeah, it's alarming at first.
Oh yeah. I feel like this summer also, not so much, you know, in regards to like being like social justice wise, like around that topic, but just growing in general as a person. You know, I felt like during quarantine I was really sitting with who I was in the past and who I was in the present, or where I was at. I was literally an artist who was back at home, no job, and in school, you know, like, I had this life before that was amazing.
You're like, wait, am I in high school again?
Yeah, like, what am I doing? And then, you know, I had this realization, like, oh, I'm not, like, those things don't define me. So what really does define me, you know? And then having to deal with that. So it is all these emotions, and you get frustrated, and you wonder why this happened and whatnot. So I understand.
I really appreciate that. I also think it would be interesting to share with anyone who might be listening to this our ages.
I was like, I don't know how much I'm supposed to say. Like, this is going in public.
Well, I think there's, you know, it's really...
But I'm fine with it.
Okay.
I'm good. I just was like, I don't know if I should say it before. Like,
oh, right. Yeah. It's like, I'm Caleb Williams. I'm this age.
Yeah, and I go to this and this school.
Yeah. Like, yeah, no, totally. There's some privacy is definitely important. Yeah, so I'm 42, and you just turned 20 over the summer.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think about where we are in our developments, in our lives as people, and in our developments as adults. And I think there's an interesting parallel. So you're 20 and moving into a bigger art career, and moving out, like transitioning from school phase to like, what is my life as an artist phase. And I think that's an interesting parallel in my position in the history of America and racism that's at the beginning stage, that parallels your history as becoming an artist. You're at your beginning stage. And so I think we face similar challenges, but with a totally different twist as we grow. And so there's this like playing field that we both exist on, but in two different
worlds.
Totally
like, we're
different
both
worlds.
Growing, but in two different topics.
Yeah.
You know, and it's just like, which makes me just think about like, which is so crazy. Like you said, we all experience similar emotions, but just different topics, different areas. You know, like, I am not in your position where I have to be a better ally in that sense. But you know what it is to be a new artist and emerging into the world.
Exactly.
You know? So I think that's interesting.
So you know what it is to be a Black person in America.
Yeah.
And I don't have a clue. You know? And you have more of a clue about being an artist than I do about being a Black person. But we have different paths of what our goals are. So I think that's an interesting parallel on this path. And then getting back to the text that we quoted, the Combi River Collective, being a group of women, you brought up a really nice point about us being women. Yeah,
I thought that it was really interesting. Like, obviously what they were saying as a collective was, you know, a call to action, but I also saw it as a call to action because we are both women, you know, and to form an alliance. You know, at the end of the day, even though you are a white woman and you have certain privileges that I don't, you're still a woman, you know, and we don't really get the same advantages that men do, you know. And I just feel like they were saying, like, as women, if we could come together and what privilege you have and what spark we have for hope and change and brought that together, it would be amazing.
So powerful.
Yeah. It would be so powerful. So that's really what even though I saw the other things they were talking about, that's what I saw, you know, right off the bat.
I love that. I think you also highlight something interesting around, like, what privilege is and degrees of privilege. Because there are some white people that are like, privilege, where's my privilege? I would like to activate my privilege now. You know, I'm being paid minimum wage and I can't meet my bills, and, like, how is that privileged, right? But what that is missing is the understanding of, like, what it takes for a Black person to get to the same position
you're at.
It's a totally different scale. And then it also makes me think about, I'll never understand what it is to be Black, but I also face my own challenges. Like, I have narcolepsy, for example, and that's definitely created barriers in my life. I also come from a family that they are, like, okay that I'm an artist. Like, they don't hate that I'm an artist, but they don't get it, you know, and they weren't supportive in that, like, emotional support kind of way. My family loves me and I love them and they did their best, and I never want to disparage them, but I also, you know, they had different hopes for me. I had gone to college as a science major in marine biology and physics, and then I came out an artist. My poor father, you know, he was like, you know, could you please take a business class? And I was like, no. I'm going to major in French and art instead with a minor in art history. So, like, and I understand that, you know, he didn't want me to struggle, right? He was trying to set me up for success. But what he didn't know was that for me, success was going to look different.
Yeah.
And everyone I grew up with still lives in the state they grew up in. Nashville. Most of my family is in Nashville and in Louisville, Kentucky. And that's some 50 plus people. I'm the only one that left. I'm the only artist. And so, you know, I face my own set of challenges, but the difference is that I started out farther ahead. I saw a really good example in a video of a race, and it had all the white people move up 500 feet.
I think I've seen that.
Yeah. And then they're like, go. And then all the white people, like, finish ahead of the Black people. Yeah. Except, like, maybe one or two Black people, like, get up there.
I think I've seen that. I've definitely seen that.
That's a powerful visual.
Yeah, I was just like, wow, you know.
That's what it is.
So they talked about, like, 2-family household, you know, and just different things that, or, like, yeah, I remember.
Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting for this podcast. For me, there's a lot of research and, like, an academic element that I bring to it because it's education. I really get excited about reading and education. And so I actually end up needing to do a lot of preparation that I am grateful for the opportunity to learn and to do. And I feel so just blessed and honored to be in dialogue with you on these topics, because I see you as someone who is really clear-headed, and you take care of yourself, and you have a clear vision for your objectives in the world as you move through it. And I think that's a really beautiful thing.
Well, I think this is also interesting, you know, bringing that up, because I was like, oh my God, do I have to prepare something? Like, you know, like, do I have to prepare? What do I need
You're
to
already
But
prepared.
it's just like, but I also do feel like, you know, obviously, like, certain things that I address, like, you know, also just being correct on it. But then I was just like, my experience, like, you know, like, my experience and what I know and how I feel. But then this, like, when you say, like, you're doing your homework, but then it's like, the podcast is meant to help educate others and help others, you know. But it's also like, you're doing your homework, but then we're having this conversation, so simultaneously it's also helping you.
Yeah.
You know, because
true.
we haven't talked about this in a long time, so it's like, you're coming back to me with things you've learned, you know, that I haven't heard. So it's like, it's helping you at the same time while it's helping others. And I think that's what's so beautiful. It's not like you're coming to the podcast, like, telling people, this is what you need to do, and X, Y, and Z, and I know it because I'm perfect, and I did this, and you need to do this. Like, this is not, you know, a subscription for a program, you know? Like,
right.
That's not what this is. So I think that's what's really beautiful that in this. You know, and as artists, this seems like a art piece, you know? That's how I'm viewing it. I don't see it as just a podcast. I see it as an art piece. And art is always evolving. You never know how it's going to turn out. And, you know, art takes different forms. And like I said with, like, Urban Jungle before, you know, reinterpreting, like, the beautiful, the ugly parts of society. And, you know, being able to be a co-host with you on this, it's like, this is another aspect that I'm able to put my foot in, you know, put my hands on, and see the world become a better place. Because that's all I want. If, you know, if something was to happen tomorrow, I would be happy with knowing, like, I was able to put my best hand forward in, like, helping this world. So, yeah.
I totally appreciate that sentiment. I think that's, you know, if we can live every day that way, how lucky would we be? I also love that you compare this to an artwork, because I like to tell people when I'm sharing with them the value of art that I see undervalued in the world around us, is that with contemporary art in particular, every time you come to it, there's something new to see, because you're new each time you show up to the artwork. So, like, oh, the way that red interacts with that.
Yeah.
Or, like, oh, I never noticed that figure has that expression. Or the scale, like, the scale can hit you in a totally different way.
Yeah.
And showing up over and over gives you that variety and that richness of experience.
That's so true. I was at the new museum today, and there was a video piece, and I feel terrible that I can't remember the artist's name right now, but you should definitely
note it in the show notes. We'll add it in the show notes.
You should definitely see the show. But the piece that I saw this time, I don't know if there was something wrong with the audio or if I hadn't stayed the whole time for the video like last time, but there was an audio portion that wasn't playing. And I was able to concentrate on, like, the movement of the people dancing, and it was just this, like, ticking sound that was going back and forth, and it was just like, I was so drawn into the work that I wasn't away when I first saw it, you know, and it was just so beautiful. And you're so right, like, you can watch something so many times, you can watch a movie so many times, and you'll find something new every single time, you know, and it's just like, wow, like, why didn't I see this? Or even just reading a book, you know, you'll find, like, different interpretations or different, like, things to take from it that you didn't get before. So you're so right.
It's a beautiful thing about being human.
Yeah.
And it's also, like, a counter to the fast-paced social media thing, right? Where it's like you look at something once and it's fast and you got it.
You got it. You think
it's the opposite.
Yeah, it's totally opposite. And I think that's what's so beautiful about, like, art and being in the real world and kind of, like, not having to deal with this digital presence, which we're in, and we kind of forced to be in, now because we're in a pandemic.
Yeah.
But just taking moments to really sit with yourself and digest things. That's what's so beautiful, because we tend to get so wrapped up in, like you said, this fast-paced world that we don't really get to see the beauty in things or really question things. We take things for face value when it shouldn't be.
I think you tapped into the gift of coronavirus. It sounds kind of messed up to say that, but many of us have taken this opportunity to self-evaluate and to look at our lives and to see what about it isn't working for us, and create a new version, and also invest ourselves in things we do really care about.
Yeah.
A lot of people are getting to know their families on a whole nother level. A lot of people are engaging with social justice on a whole new level. A lot of people are realizing their footprint, their environmental footprint has been very, very negative, very unhealthy. And as we emerge, hopefully, fingers crossed, this year, can we take that new learning with us? How will we take it with us?
Yeah, what actions will be put into, place?
And that's what we're doing here.
Yeah.
We're trying to set ourselves up and other people up for a successful movement into equality for all Americans and all people. Because we all are born deserving it.
Yes.
No matter what society tells you.
Yes, no matter what society tells you.
Well, this is fantastic. I'm really excited about it. I want to share with anyone listening that we have topics coming up that we'll be discussing: communication, collaboration, and self-care. Yep. And one of my favorites, where do I go with these awkward feelings to deal with them? We don't have a clean word for that yet, but I think that's a really important process to know who to take your feelings to as an ally around uncomfortable experiences or things you're working through. Well, thank you so much, Caleb.
Yes, of course. This is amazing.
You're such a gem. I'm so lucky to know you. Okay, everyone, we will sign off and look forward to sharing more with you in the future.
Yeah.
Bye.